Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Imagine walking through the bustling, newly paved streets of 1920s Vienna. The city is desperately trying to modernize, right? Pulling itself out of the ashes of the Great War. You hear the rumble of streetcars, the chatter of people outside cafes, and the distant toll of massive church bells.
It's a very vibrant, chaotic picture.
It really is. But then it's Maundy Thursday. And the bells just suddenly go dead silent.
Right.
And in that heavy, unnatural silence, you realize something ancient and starving has slipped through the veil, and it is hunting your players.
Such a terrifying setup.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In our previous discussion, we explored the deeply tangled real-world history of Easter. We broke down the pagan roots, the Anglo-Saxon goddess Astara, mentioned by the Venerable Bee.
Yeah, and all those ancient spring fertility rites.
Exactly. The bonfires, the sacrifices, and the early church's strategy of syncretism, basically absorbing older traditions to survive. Today, we are taking all of that real-world history and showing you how to weaponize it for your next tabletop role-playing game.
Because it is entirely possible to take a historical textbook and just turn it into a nightmare engine for a game.
Absolutely.
The designers of the Vienna Shadows TTRPG did exactly that with their newly released Easter setting material. They didn't just invent monsters out of thin air. They took the actual documented folklore of the Alpine regions, the exact history we analyzed previously, and fused it with the very real historical tensions of post-war Europe. They built a total pressure cooker.
So if you are a fellow learner or a game master looking to build an unforgettable, deeply atmospheric experience for your players, you are absolutely in the right place. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are taking the historical facts from our last deep dive and dropping them straight into the fictionalized, incredibly dark 1920s sandbox of this RPG. But before we look at the monsters, we really have to understand the sandbox itself.
Right, the setting is everything here.
How does the game blend the real 1920s with ancient myth? Because this isn't just generic 1920s Europe. The game specifically sets the action during the historical Red Vienna period.
Which is a crucial thematic choice. Red Vienna was a period of intense socialist and political restructuring right after the absolute devastation of World War I.
It was a massive shift.
Yeah, you have an administration building these massive, modern, rationalist tenements. They are celebrating science, progress, and, what they see as the rational rebirth of society.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Exactly. The city is trying desperately to erase its old imperial past and look to the future.
But beneath that modernizing society, the game introduces this terrifying metaphysical concept. It treats Easter in the Alps not just as a Christian holiday, but as a time out of time.
A liminal space.
Right. It takes those ancient goddess myths we tracked back to Proto-Indo-European roots and the folklore idea that the veil between worlds physically thins during the spring equinox.
It collides them right into the release of the dead.
It's like taking a gritty, historical, political map of post-WWI Europe and overlaying it with a cosmic horror map drawn by Jacob Grimm. The two realities are just bleeding into each other.
That is a great way to visualize it.
You've got urban socialists debating policy on one street corner and ancient fertility nightmares waking up from the soil on the next.
What's fascinating here is why this specific week works so effectively for tabletop campaign pacing.
Oh, the timeline, yeah.
Right. By utilizing Holy Week, the car wash, the game creates a built-in, unyielding ticking clock for the players. The narrative operates strictly from Maundy Thursday to Easter Sunday.
Just a few days.
Exactly. And during that incredibly compressed timeline, you have these hidden cults fighting a shadow war for control over the released souls and the primal energy of the spring dawn.
And the players are just trapped right in the middle of it.
Which forces them to make desperate, ill-advised choices because they simply don't have the luxury of waiting around.
A ticking clock is the best friend of any game master. So if we have this immense spiritual pressure building up in the city over 4 days, someone is going to try to light the match.
Oh, absolutely.
Who is trying to harness it? Let's break down the three main antagonist factions your players will face. And they aren't your standard mustache-twirling villains.
No, they're much more complex.
Their motivations are deeply tied to the historical syncretism we've been studying. They represent three totally different ideological responses to this ancient magic waking up.
Right, and the first group really represents the desire to dominate that magic. They are known as the Golden Robes, or the Architects of Ostara.
The architects?
Yeah. Their entire doctrine is absolute control. They focus strictly on the pagan roots of Eostra, or Ostara, but they twist that ancient fertility concept into a tool for racial and social purification.
Wow, so they completely weaponize it.
They do. They view the spring resurrection not as a universal gift for humanity, but as a weapon to protect the surviving imperial elite.
The way they execute this is so incredibly cynical, and it uses a real piece of history. They weaponize the palm bushin.
The blessed palm bushes.
Yeah, the ones traditionally carried on Palm Sunday. According to the game's lore, by weaving specific protective herbs, like yew or holly, into these bundles, they create literal supernatural wards.
But the cruelty lies in how they distribute them.
Right.
They only use those wards to protect the estates of the wealthy. They intentionally leave those newly built, massive socialist tenements totally vulnerable to the roaming spirits pouring through the veil.
So it is a very literal form of supernatural class warfare.
Exactly. And the mechanics for interacting with them at the table are brutal.
Oh, yeah. If your players tried to infiltrate one of their events, say sneaking into a garden hunt at an imperial estate to steal a ward, they have to pass a charisma check.
And if they fail?
If a player fails, the cult marks them as a palm donkey or palmazel.
Which is such a brilliant corruption of a real historical term.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, historically, the palmazel was just a wooden figure of Christ riding a donkey used in processions. Or sometimes it was a teasing, harmless nickname for the last person out of bed on Palm Sunday morning. But the game takes that quaint tradition and turns it into a death sentence.
It's terrifying.
Becoming a palm donkey strips away your anonymity. You become a social pariah, actively hunted by the cult's enforcers through the streets.
So if the Golden Robes are trying to hoard this ancient spring magic for the elite, there has to be a reaction from the streets, right? People who want to tear that control down.
The opposite extreme.
That brings us to the second faction, the Black Robes or the Cult of the Unleashed. Their doctrine isn't control, it's pure chaos.
They believe chaos is liberation.
Yes, they exploit a very specific, chilling piece of folklore. In some Alpine traditions, there was a belief that God actually releases all souls from purgatory to roam the earth freely from Easter night until Pentecost.
It's a brief window where the gates of the afterlife are just left ajar.
And the Black Robes want to kick those gates wide open and break them off the hinges. We talked in our last deep dive about the Beltane bonfires, how the ancient Celts used fire for purification and to protect their herds from evil spirits.
Right, the cleansing fires.
The Black Robes invert that completely. They light counter bonfires across the city, but they aren't using fire to ward off spirits. They use these dark fires to deliberately blind the roaming souls.
Oh, so they can't leave?
Exactly, preventing them from ever finding their way back to the afterlife. Their goal is to permanently populate Vienna with an army of the unhallowed dead. And these aren't just generic medieval ghosts.
No, they're pulling souls straight out of the trenches of the Great War.
It's so dark.
That detail changes the entire emotional weight of the game. It connects the ancient primal fear of spirits with the very fresh, very real geopolitical trauma of World War I.
It makes it so immediate.
For the players, facing an unhallowed dead isn't just fighting a monster. It might mean fighting a ghostly manifestation of a soldier who died in the mud of Passchendaele just 2 years prior. It grounds the supernatural threat in the immediate, agonizing historical reality of the 1920s.
So while the Golden Robes and the Black Robes are fighting this shadow war of control versus chaos, there is a third group that operates completely differently.
The Observers.
Yeah, the Crimson Robes, or the Archivists of the Dawn. Their doctrine is memory. They just want to observe and understand the veil. And they exploit my absolute favorite piece of real-world Catholic lore from this whole setting.
You're referring to the silencing of the bells.
Yes, the real historical tradition that church bells fly to Rome from Maundy Thursday to Easter Sunday. Out of mourning, the massive bells in the cathedrals go completely silent.
And in that silence, they make their move.
Exactly. In that terrifying citywide silence, the Crimson Robes step out into the streets. They lead processions using Ratchin, those heavy, rhythmic wooden noisemakers.
It's a very harsh sound.
The game establishes that they are using the clatter of the Ratchin to literally record the frequency of the supernatural veil while the holy bills are gone and the supernatural interference is clear.
But the source material introduces a splinter group of these archivists, right? Called the Cracked Branch.
Yes.
The Cracked Branch takes the desire for observation and pushes it into active, catastrophic interference. They aren't satisfied with just recording the veil. They want to physically pull something through it.
They believe the main cult can use the Ratchin to summon the Ostara hair. But I have to stop here because this is where my jaw dropped reading the source book.
I know exactly what you're going to ask.
Wait, the game turns the Easter Bunny into a flightless monster bird that injects you with parasitic larvae? How does a game master even introduce that at a table without the players just bursting out laughing before they run in terror? It sounds so absurd.
On its face, it does sound absurd. I mean, parasitic Easter eggs.
Right.
But it works because it perfectly adapts the actual Germanic folklore we discussed in the previous deep dive. Think back to the fanciful myth where the goddess Ostara finds a dying bird in the snow.
Oh, right, and she saves it.
To save its life, she transforms it into a hare, which is why the hare retains the ability to lay eggs. The designers took that quaint, lovely origin myth and reversed the polarity into body horror. The creature in the game is a monstrous hybrid, a furious bird trapped inside a mammalian body, seeking to reclaim its original form through blood sacrifice.
That is deeply upsetting.
And those eggs are parasitic incubators. When a GM frames it not as a cartoon bunny, but as a violent corruption of a beloved myth, the laughter stops immediately. The players realize they are dealing with an entity in constant agonizing pain that wants to share that pain with them.
Okay, yeah, framing it as a creature trapped in the wrong flesh does make it deeply unsettling. So knowing these terrifying factions are out there is one thing, but how do normal people, the player characters, actually survive a city tearing itself apart with all this ancient magic?
Let's look at the mechanical engine of the game.
It's surprisingly stripped down compared to a lot of modern RPGs.
It is. It abandons complex mathematics for a very grounded D6 roll-under system.
Right. Players start with a base value of 3 and 4 main attributes: strength, intellect, charisma, and perception.
Very low numbers.
To succeed at anything, you roll a single 6-sided die, and you must score lower than your attribute.
Think about the psychological impact of that mechanic. In a traditional fantasy RPG, you are a hero rolling a 20-sided die, trying to hit massive numbers to conquer a dragon. You feel powerful.
You're basically a superhero.
Exactly. But in this system, rolling under a small number like a 3 creates a profound feeling of shrinking space. You aren't a superhero. You are ordinary, you are fragile, and the math itself constantly reminds you that the odds are entirely against you.
And the game directly ties the folklore we've been discussing into your chances of survival via dynamic modifiers.
How does that work in practice?
Well, let's say you want to fight off one of those released souls from the Great War. That requires a strength check. But if you have holy protection, meaning your character is physically holding a blessed Pombushan twig with defensive herbs like holly.
The GM gives you a -1 to your roll.
Which is good.
Yeah. Since you desperately want to roll into your attribute, lowering your die result is a massive advantage.
That forces the players to actively engage with the folklore to survive. They can't just walk into a shop and buy a bigger gun or thicker armor.
Right. A rifle won't save you.
They have to understand the warding properties of juniper versus holly. They have to treat the world's ancient superstitions as if they are hard empirical science. If they ignore the folklore, their characters will die.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The game has a modifier called the Silent Hours. Remember those 3 days when the church bells have flown to Rome?
The quiet period. During that window, the absolute absence of sacred, consecrated sound in the city makes it fundamentally harder to sense the supernatural. The veil is thicker. So the GM adds a +1 to all perception checks.
Oh, wow.
It's like playing a stealth video game, but the game deliberately turns off your radar for 3 days straight just when the monsters are hunting you.
It is the masterclass in atmospheric game design. This minimalist D6 system removes the friction of calculating modifiers on a spreadsheet.
You aren't doing math in your head.
No, it focuses the player entirely on the narrative tension and their immediate visceral vulnerability. You were just holding a single six-sided die, desperately hoping you roll a 1 or a 2, because you are standing in a pitch-black, silent tenement hallway and you can hear something wet dragging itself up the stairs.
Exactly. I mean, looking at the bestiary, the threats backing up that tension are terrifying. Failing a sanity check against one of those WWI shadows inflicts 1d6 dread damage.
Which can completely break a character's mind.
Well, fast. Then there's the Winter Witch. She's a neutral entity that roams Eastern night to curse livestock, directly mirroring the ancient Frau Perchta myths we looked at.
The older pagan traditions.
She blends into the lingering winter chill, so you need a successful perception check just to spot her before she hexes your entire party.
And with the silent hours modifier, that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And there's the Ratchen Wraith, an acolyte whose wooden ratchet produces a sonic vibration so intense it can shatter glass and bone. You have to roll strength just to keep your footing against the sound.
Every single creature acts as a mechanical enforcement of the setting's themes. The mechanics don't just support the lore, they are completely intertwined with it.
We have the historical setting, we have the villains, and we have the brutal rules of survival. Now, let's put the nightmare together at the table. We're going to give you specific, ready-to-play campaign hooks to drop your players into.
These are great.
The source material provides 3 campaign scenario seeds. They walk you right through how to force the players into the middle of this mess. Seed A is called The Bells of the Nameless.
A fantastic title.
The setup is perfect. The bells of St. Stephen's Cathedral have gone to Rome. The city is in the grip of the silent hours. The players are investigating the Friedhof der Namenlosen, the cemetery of the nameless.
Which is a very real, very melancholic location in Vienna. It's where unidentified bodies, often victims of suicide or accidents pulled from the Danube River, were buried outside consecrated ground.
The Black Robes are using the silence of the holy bells to target that exact spot. They are pulling those unbekannt, the unknown souls, straight out of the freezing river.
Oh, that's chilling.
Picture the scene at the table. The GM asks the players for a perception check. If they succeed, they realize they can hear a discordant, rhythmic tolling, but it's coming from underwater beneath the surface of the Danube.
That's such a great detail.
To stop the ritual, they have to physically fight through the cultists on the riverbank and use a strength check to ring a salvaged blessed bell. The consecrated sound shatters the ritual and sends the drowned back to the depths.
It is incredibly cinematic. It takes the very real tragedy of that specific cemetery and weaponizes it, forcing the players to confront the immediate threat of the Black Robes' chaos doctrine while wading through freezing mud.
Then we have Seed B, the blood dye ritual. This one is pure, insidious dread. It is set in a communal laundry room deep inside one of the new Red Vienna tenements.
So right in the heart of the socialist housing.
Yeah. The Golden Robes have infiltrated the community. Traditionally, families use natural dyes like beetroot or spinach to color their Easter eggs.
Right.
The cult replaces those vats of dye with human blood to create what they call life-eater eggs.
Notice how that perverts the ancient, universal symbol of the egg. Long before Christianity, the egg represented new life, fertility, and the promise of spring. The Golden Robes are corrupting that life force to fuel their own wards.
Players have to use their intellect to identify the unnatural crimson hue of the eggs before the tenement residents distribute them to their children. But here is the twisted mechanical hook.
The poisoned apple.
Yes. So if a player character actually eats a life-eater egg, they fully restore their health, but they permanently lower their sanity and subtly join the cult's hive mind. That is the ultimate poisoned apple scenario.
It really is.
How do you, as a GM, tempt a desperate player to actually eat one of these things?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about forcing agonizing choices through the mechanics. Remember, player attributes are incredibly low, and survival is mathematically difficult.
Right, you're fragile.
Imagine a player character hovering at exactly 1 health after a brutal fight. They know the next scratch will kill them. The game master doesn't have to force them to eat the egg.
They'll do it themselves.
The brutal reality of that D6 system will make the player look at that grotesque blood-red egg and voluntarily consider doing the unthinkable just to survive the night. True horror in an RPG doesn't come from a jump scare, it comes from complicity.
Wow. Desperation really does make monsters of us all.
Yeah.
Finally, we have Seed C, the Crossroads Hunter. This scenario builds on the deep European folklore of crossroads being liminal spaces of intense magical power.
Classic trope.
The setup involves an old ritual. A person has to lie flat on their back at a crossroads between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. on Easter night without laughing or crying. A young member of the Crimson Cracked brand disappeared while trying to do this, hoping to meet an entity called the Hunter to receive a gift of forbidden knowledge.
The Hunter being a black-robe warlock, stepping into the mythological role of the devil at the crossroads, offering a Faustian bargain.
The players are hired to track this missing cultist down. When they finally find the warlock, it requires a massive charisma check to even attempt to bargain with him.
The cost is steep.
The real gut punch is the climax. The players discover that the gift the missing NPC received was actually their own soul, ripped from their body and trapped inside a silver locket.
Oh, man.
And the locket has a date engraved on it, exactly 1 week from today.
It beautifully weaves the overarching themes of our deep dive, fertility, sacrifice, and rebirth into tangible, high-stakes player choices. The players must bargain with a literal force of chaos to save the life of a rival cultist, knowing that the clock is ticking down to an expiration date.
It is just spectacular world building all around. So let's summarize the incredible value you now have. By combining the historical knowledge of Easter's pagan roots from our last deep dive with the lore, the factions, and the mechanics of the Vienna Shadows RPG, you are fully equipped.
You have everything you need.
You can run a deeply unsettling, culturally rich tabletop campaign.
The takeaway here is that the best TTRPG campaigns don't just rely on jump scares.
No, they don't.
They rely on grounding the horror in real history and authentic folklore, making the fictional world feel dangerously real. It makes the world feel tactile to the people sitting around your table.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean? We've unpacked how a game can take the real-world history we studied and turn it into an engine for dread. But I want to leave you with one final, chilling thought to mull over that builds on the source material.
This is a really interesting point to consider about our own modern environment.
It is. We spent a lot of time today talking about the game's mechanic of the silent hours, that terrifying 3-day window when the protective church bells are gone, making it fundamentally harder to sense the supernatural.
Right, the radar is off.
It makes you wonder, in our real modern world with all its constant noise, the hum of traffic, the buzz of servers, the endless notifications, what everyday silences or missing sounds might actually be masking something ancient and unseen slipping right past us.
This concludes today's episode. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.